Welcome back to the Brothers War EDH. My name is Ryan. I'm joined here with Chris and Blake. It's been a long time. You know, things just happen. It's whatever. We're here now, and we're here for y'all. Chris, how's it going?
It's going pretty okay.
Going pretty okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Made the top 16 in that tournament, and just
Wow.
That's decided. Just decided to vamp for a while. Just let that linger. Mr. Blake, how you doing?
Things are good.
Calm and cool as ever. Before we begin with this episode, I just want to ask if you can just please like, share, subscribe to the channel. Let's get into today's topic. The last episode that we did was card advantage in white for cEDH. In this one, we're going to do card advantage in blue.
The thing we want to talk about first is why blue has, or how blue takes advantage of cards. Specifically drawing cards and stuff like that, but like really blue is just the premier standard. Like we measure things on mono white or mono green or whatever based off of how well mono blue does it. So they're just the top tier of card advantage.
Right. Most cards in there, it just says draw a card. The color to draw cards. It's what it's known for. The big blue. Let's just get the two that everyone is going to be talking about already, because it's just easy money. Ristic and Mystic. Don't even talk about them. They're already good. Casual, cEDH, like they're just that good. You're going to be drawing a bunch of cards. Mystic, that will draw you some cards, and then eventually it just gets banned. And then Ristic, I would say now nowadays people try to make sure that they have stuff for things like Ristic these days. Maybe not as much back in the day when everyone was just trying to just turbo and just go off, and they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm trying to win as fast as I can, so if you draw cards, whatever, I just gotta try to win. But now in this like mid-range meta, those cards are just so freaking good.
They need to be banned, honestly.
Coming from the no ban guy. Ban Mystic and Ristic. Well, Ristic more than Mystic, or ban them both?
Ban them both.
Ban them both.
Shoot, ban the One Ring too.
What do you think, Blake?
Anything that creates this degenerate, like non-game, like Mystic and Ristic, and even the One Ring nowadays is not healthy for the format.
I feel like by that argument, there's so much that's unhealthy for the format that you could never really deal with it all.
But nothing creates non-games like these cards do.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but sure. I don't know if they necessarily even create non-games. There are plenty of games where a Ristic or a Mystic gets put on the table and it doesn't actually have that much of an effect.
Every time I see it, it's always well, Ristic. Man, it's hard because
they're never not good.
Yeah,
I'm definitely not here to say that, but I don't think it's like there's plenty of games where those cards hit the table and that person doesn't win.
I can definitely see that. I just think that more times than not, I was talking to this guy at the last tournament, and we were talking about those two specific cards, and he was like, yeah, like after Flash Hulk and even something like Blue Farm, which is still considered to be one of the best decks, like games are just a little bit grindier, a little slower, not like too slow, but you're definitely just getting a ton of value off of those cards a lot more than before.
I do definitely agree that we're in a meta that's basically dominated by mid-range, and those cards are specifically good in that meta game. So there is absolutely that argument that basically a lot of games are going to hinge around somebody finding that card and trying to build value through it to eventually win the game. But I don't necessarily think that's not the only meta in that can be done. It's not the only way to win. There are plenty of decks in the meta that prove that wrong. So if anything is more pronounced and degenerate and leads to wins, I think you're looking more towards your dock sides that sort of thing. I think that's more all your decks are very cookie cutter around that very specific card. It's what we'd call in game developers is meta warping, where basically almost every deck is either built to play around that card or playing to beat that card in some shape, form, or matter. I don't think Ristic and Mystic fall into that category necessarily.
Oh yeah, I'd rather see a Mystic or a Ristic than a freaking Dockside any day.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I think it depends. I would say it depends on what stage of the game. If we're talking turn 1 Ristic or turn 1 Mystic, I'm pretty sad about it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I will say, I do also think that Mystic is not as. I think Mystic can be dealt with via table politics or like just everyone optimally playing. Because I think if everybody outside of there being like a turbo player at the table or something like that, which I feel like I see a lot less nowadays, because again the metagame is very skewed towards your mid games and building card advantage or building some sort of advantage to then take the win. Most decks I feel like nowadays are ready for that first person to present their win, in which they basically the rest of the table expends resources to stop them, and then the second person who tries to win usually is the one who does. So now it feels almost like an arms race for card advantage and other interaction and that sort of thing. So I think the earlier those cards come down, definitely the more likely that person is to win, because they'll be able to present their first win, get it dealt with, or have enough card advantage to respond to the first dealing, or they'll have an engine to then build back up and present their second win, depending on what deck it is and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
I will say I do still think that cEDH also, like, everyone tunnel visions on their like process too much, and they're not thinking about what potentially their actions do into others, because I definitely do see Ristics and Mystics that get fed too much, especially considering that they don't think about the fact that whatever they're probably doing or whatever win they're like surging towards, that person probably is now going to have a response to them depending on what color pairing they're playing. But I mean, obviously they have blue if they have one of those, which tends to be your color of most interaction. So I think a better pilot, or especially a better informed table who's actually thinking about the actions of what they're doing, I think can pivot around those cards and make them almost non-factors or very minimal factors. So I that's why I ultimately like those cards, is that they present at least an interesting dynamic, in the sense that is it better for me to surge ahead but give this person card advantage? Do I think that I can deal with whatever I'm drawing them into? But it's also a source of frustration when you've got two people at the table that are, committed to not giving that person resources, and the other one just says, "I don't fucking care what anything is happening. I'm playing these cards, and I'm fucking gonna win." And that person doesn't win, and then they've basically handed the game to that person because they fed them 6 cards while they were going off. So, I can see the degeneracy and the problem with them, but I also think that can be stifled by good play.
Yes.
One of my favorite things.
It really feels bad whenever you're like player 2 and 3. Player 1 plays a Mystic, and player 2 and 3 are like, I'm not feeding this, or going to develop my board, and then player 4 is like, oh well, I'm just gonna
See, I was gonna say I would do that
you're
for
behind.
sure. I would do that for sure if I was player 4. 2 players didn't do anything, and I'm going and well, I mean,
see, that's what I'm talking about.
Like
you can't.
It depends on what I have though. Like if I got like a lot of stuff and then I'm doing something like super relevant, then yeah, I'm gonna go for it. But if it's just like 1 mana rock, then definitely not.
Yeah, again, it's all cost analysis, right? Because especially in this instance, if a player 1 has ramped enough to the point to casting a 3 mana spell on turn 1, I'm definitely not interested in giving that person cards, no matter like, I think the only case we have there is like, if I'm like double, 0 mana rocks into like some large play for myself or something like that, and that also better like set me off really hard, because again, unless I'm doing that into my own Ristic study or something like that, that's one of the instances that I would probably do that, because I think that at least in that scenario, while I am benefiting them cards, I am then benefited with my own in subsequent turns from them, who probably is trying to pop off with the cards I just gave them. So again, I think there's a ton of nuance, which is why I actually kind of think the card really is interesting. It just can be very frustrating when you don't have someone who cares or is solely focused on their game and doesn't think about the game state as a whole.
Absolutely agree. Chris, you put the One Ring in there with those two. The One Ring creates non-games to you too?
Oh yeah. Game warps around the One Ring once it lands on the table, because usually One Ring is just so easy to cast. Like, people are casting at turns 1 and 2 right now, so like you I mean, it just snowballs. It could be better than a Ristic or Mystic sometimes. So, yeah. I mean,
I actually do agree that that's more. I think that card in of itself is more format warping than Ristic or Mystic myself, because to your case, it's extremely easy to cast. Every deck can play it, and it in of itself protects the person who casts it and protects itself by having indestructibility, which is particularly relevant because there's not a ton of interaction, but it's also incentivized the entire field to run more exile effects for artifacts because it in of itself is indestructible. I think there's a lot less of decks warping themselves around Mystic and Ristic by putting in more enchantment removal. I don't think anybody adds additional enchantment removal for those. I think they run about the same amount. I definitely think artifact exiling has gone way up in terms of like people playing cards to actually deal with the One Ring, because most mid-range decks have a copy of that and are looking to find it.
Right.
Especially, which, funnily enough, blue decks who are incentivized to all play Mystic and Ristic also play One Ring because blue has so many artifact tutors as well.
The card is insane.
And I love it.
We all know how good the card is. Plenty of the One Rings on in Cowtown run.
Oh, yeah.
Probably true.
You'll definitely be seeing it in my deck. You know,
yeah.
Everybody's deck is gonna have a ring.
I was about to say Jaheira runs it. So,
anyways, let's get on to the blue cards. The first one I got on my list is Ledger Shredder. 2 mana. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you connive, draw a card, then discard. If it's a non-land card, put a 1/1 counter. I've seen a lot of people play this card in their decks. You also get to discard something to the yard. So in the event that you might want to like reanimate something.
So you bring this card up, and it's on my honorable mention because this is where we talk about what is actual card advantage. Because technically, Ledger Shredder is carded selection, not card advantage. Because you're not going up cards, you're discarding. Now, dude, I don't disagree that it should be on this list because it definitely matters. And, effectively discarding a land that you don't need or something that you want to be in the graveyard while also getting a card to replace the one, you can argue is advantage, but technically this is card selection, not card advantage.
Yeah. The reason why I have it on here is because this can happen multiple times. So it's like you just keep on going. But
right, but you're never going up cards.
You're never going up cards. You're just like having that selection. But I figured that, okay, well, if this happens more times than not, then, you're kind of like seeing more cards. So yeah, you're right. In that case,
I don't disagree that it doesn't need to be here. It's just that it was one of my honorable mentions because it's technically not card advantage.
What's funny is that I have a whole section to card selection. Oh. And for some reason, I guess I just had this in here because I was like, well, it triggers more times. I guess it means you get more. So Blake, you got me on that one. Let's get all of the card selection cards out of the way then. I had this one on here, Spellseeker, Mystic Sanctuary, and then obviously Mystical Tutor.
You could throw really all the blue tutors on there depending on what sort of deck you're running, Fabricate, all that kind of stuff.
I had Teferi, Master of Time. For some reason, I've been seeing this card being played a lot more when I look at decks.
Talking like raw dog for value? I don't think I've ever really seen that before.
I've been seeing it on some lists because I looked through the freaking EDH top 16. I've been seeing some of them on there for some reason. It is really slow.
Card is good. It kind of functions like a Ledger Shredder, right? Everybody's turn, you get to throw something away and replace it. So I mean, it functions a lot like a Ledger Shredder. So it would make sense that it sees play in that sort of idea. It's just significantly more mana than Ledger Shredder.
Right. Also, I had Narset Part of Veils on here. Because kind of going back to last time's episode, you get kind of like the like Staxy element of it, but then you get to then have its ability on there. So
yeah, not only are you denying cards, so you can argue that you're going up cards while stopping your opponents from going up cards, which can be an advantage of itself, but you also have its minus ability that does let you find stuff as well on top of that. Though I think most people just play it for the stacks effect, it does also have advantage on it that you can use.
I definitely have no wheels on this.
I've got the entire class, so like Time Twister being the premier, but then every other effect that does something very similar, where basically you discard what you have, shuffle, and draw 7. I mean, to the same argument of Red's wheel effects, and if they're timed properly, how it can mess up somebody's game while you dump your entire hand onto the board and refresh with 7 basically wins you the game in and of itself. I think Time Twister can do the exact same thing, or it can extend combos, or can be used as combos, all kinds of stuff. So I think that definitely deserves, that class of card deserves a conversation.
Cantrips.
Cantrips. Right.
Like Get Probe and
Ponder,
Preordain.
Preordain,
Those are
Brainstorm.
not necessarily going up in cards, but they are a little bit like card selection because you have to spend a card to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they definitely fall into card selection. Though I do think a lot of those cantrips also, especially in like my style of decks, are used as combo pieces of themselves because they trigger your spell effects and that sort of thing. So they kind of serve double duty and actually turn into card advantage depending on your deck and that sort of thing. So they also can be looked at on a different axis, because I think by themselves they're fine, but once you start throwing additional pieces into there, those cantrips actually turn into very cheap card advantage spells.
Fairy Mastermind was just one.
Yep.
That I had.
Probably that's another premier one.
Yep, really good.
Yeah, the art's awesome. Also, something that
that's the worst part of the card.
I agree. I wish it was. I really wish this was a different art actually.
A different art.
Yes, I don't like this art at all.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of them making the world
players.
champion cards. Yeah. But they make the card, like, I'm fine with that being a thing, but they always make the card really good, so it sees a lot of play. Because you've seen that with the red one that they did, that got a lot of like standard and I think a decent chunk of modern play, not anything in cEDH. But then the Fairy Mastermind is blowing up basically all over the place, and I think the card looks fucking horrendous.
Yes.
Doesn't look good. Sorry, he's fucking an Asian fairy. Just looks very weird. I don't know. Just very out of. Takes me out of the.
And I've never seen a freaking Asian fairy in my life.
It looks. I don't know. It's just got that uncanny valley kind of thing to me. It just looks weird. I don't know how exactly to explain it.
There's a card that I think that some people were like trying to like try out a lot of decks, but they saw that there was like multiple ways to like draw cards in here. It's the creature Ghostly Pilferer, the 2-mana one.
I have that on my list.
It's probably going to be pretty easy to get in, and then with like some damage, and then on your turn it untaps, you draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card, and that's just that could be multiple different spells. So I think that one was definitely worth mentioning. I haven't really seen it a whole lot in decks, but I know that when M21 came out, I know that there was like some talk about it, and I think some people were like trying it, but maybe they like fell off of it. One that I think is a pretty funny one. I don't know about y'all, probably cEDH, but like Consecrated Sphinx, man. It's it's a fatty.
I mean that does show up in Kennen decks, doesn't it?
It does.
I think that's the main place where that shows up in cEDH. Yeah.
It's different relevant. It's probably not going to be in a deck where you're trying to like freaking polymorph for it, but big mana decks like that, yeah, Kennen. Oh man, that in freaking Kennen is just crazy. And the card is just cracked. That's actually all the ones on my list that I had. The one that I made today. What do y'all got?
Then I think one that's not been mentioned so far that I think is sneaky good for multiple reasons is Seagate Restoration, the dual flip land.
Yeah.
That not only, I knew Chris was going to like this one. That not only does it serve as a land slot, but also can be used in the later game to mid game, where if you don't need that land, you can turn it into quite a good card draw spell. I think that thing is very good. One
that I think needs to be played more often is a card called Verity Circle.
Dude, I literally had that on my screen, and I was like, there's no way these guys are going to say this card right here.
Verity Circle is a 3-mana enchantment from one of the Ravnica sets,
Ravnica
Allegiance, I believe, or something. And then whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you draw a card. And you could pay 5 to tap target creature without flying. So basically, all of your dorks. I mean, I know people are coming off dorks now with the Orcish Bowmasters, but still, people are still playing dorks. But even then, anytime, I mean, as long as it's not being attacked and it becomes tapped, hey, draw a card. Not bad. There's a lot of
do think that's kind of a meta call, though, right? Because I think if you know going into like a tournament or going into your pod that you're playing against a lot of green, or you're playing against like certain archetypes that have that tap effect, that card gets insane. But then, like, because I attribute that card a lot to the green card that I like to play. That whenever any artifact
Viridian Revel.
you draw a card.
Viridian Revel.
Yeah, I attribute Viridian Circle a lot to Viridian Revel because
I agree with that.
there are tables where both of those cards can absolutely pop off and win a game because they're generating you so much advantage, and there are some circles that you get into where that is a 3 mana do not a goddamn thing.
Yep. I actually played against a Viridian Revel in the tournament, and it was a Kinnan player who played it, and the game warped around that card. That's how good the card was. Yeah.
The only other things I have on my list are like the modal draw cards. So your Archmage's Charm, your that sort of form of card where basically it's counterspell versus card draw, and basically you can use them as either mode as you so choose. I think those cards can get kind of interesting, though I think a lot of them are mostly relegated to like mono blue decks nowadays because they're just not as good and not as efficient as all your other cards. But I think those are an interesting option if you're in very low color blue.
Yeah. Also, another interesting thing is the coastal piracy reconnaissance mission.
Oh, yeah.
The ones that it's just whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. It's before they started doing the whenever a creature deals damage to one or more, or whenever one or more creatures deals damage to a player, where you can only get a maximum of 3. So these are just any creature. So if you're running a creature deck, like tokens, like Thopters or something, like Ryan's side deck, this could be something to look into because you'll be drawing a lot of cards off of it.
Oh yeah, definitely in there.
Graslox is another one of those. The Blue Timna. It's a 3 mana 3/2 horror. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to your hand, and then whenever one or more creatures you'll deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So that one's one.
I would say depending on your deck, intuition, kind of. If your graveyard's your hands, it's kind of like you're like getting more cards, kind of. But
I mean, worst case scenario, intuition falls with the tutors, right? Because it's trading your tutor for your card. And to your point, if you're playing, Muldrotha or something to that sort of akin, where you're also benefiting from cards in your graveyard, then it becomes advantage as well.
All right, well, that's gonna be the blues, man. You definitely got some really good cards in blue, obviously. In cEDH, if you really want to win, most time you're playing blue, and you're probably gonna be playing a lot of the cards that we mentioned here. That's gonna be it for our blue card advantage episode. Like what Chris said at the very beginning, the standard color for draw. Most cards just say draw a card, draw X cards. Discard your hand, draw X amount of cards. Like blue is just that's why it's one of the best. We said before that drawing cards is like the strongest thing you can do in this game, and blue is the color for that. So if you happen to like this episode or any of our other content, please be sure to like it, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell the people at your freaking LGS. Maybe at this Cowtown thing, I might be able to see some of y'all. Y'all can tell us some of y'all's good blue card advantage cards. Maybe there's some that are like sleepers that haven't come up yet. They're kind of like your Viridian Rebels in green. You just never know. That being said, my name is Ryan. This is Chris. This is Blake. We're the Brothers War. We will see y'all on the next one. Goodbye.
Goodbye.